Humanity used its time of peace wisely. Every single human realized that they might have won the battle, but the war was a whole nother animal entirely. Everyone knew that a decade was not a long time, and that's the best estimate they could get for the next invasion. Given the fact that the other species don't use quantum entanglement to communicate, which surprised the crap out of humans, the invasion forces would have to rely on, well, runners, for lack of a better term, to bring information back and forth. According to the information gathered from the broken enemy ships, they would not send ships back until they have actually secured the sector. This timeline was fairly long, but considering the distance needed to travel, it makes a lot of sense. Nearly 2 years in transit, as the FTL engines can only reach so far before needing to recharge and cool down. The Pantheon version of FTL was a type that, well, basically uses time displacement as a field. So in transmit, they can actually be easily picked up on sensors, but they are temporally phased out of our time. In other words, we can see them moving, but if we went there, you wouldn't see anything. To the occupants, this is instantaneous, so they feel as though only a few weeks have actually gone by. After 2 years of transit, the Pantheons figured it would take 4 years to completely subdue the planet. This long timeline was given as they realized they cannot just scare or bomb humans into submission. Didn't work before, won't work this time. On the ground, humans are very dangerous and pretty inventive, so they would have to expand methodically, even after the invasion carrier performed its task by deploying massive waves of soldiers and equipment to the ground. Losses were calculated up to 45%, but the subjugation of each such dangerous species would be worth it in the long run. Even if they'd been able to secure the planet, it would be another 2 years of travel to return with news of their so-called victory. If the invasion fleets didn't return, they will take another year or two in order to amass another fleet. With this information, the mass of humanity went to work. Terraforming Venus was a massive undertaking, but so worth it. About 5 years of working on Venus, the first settlers were able to breathe without respirators, and crops were actually able to be planted. Fields of grains began to spread all over a once dead world, and an entirely new type of farming techniques had to be used to keep the crops from wilting during the Venusian heat or freeze during their darkness. Though, through sheer grit and determination, Venus actually became a garden world, where once before it was basically an acid-filled rock. Mars was having issues getting enough atmosphere onto its planet. A concerted effort with drones and, of course, the stations they're attached to send as much water and ice aided with this. However, it's still going to take a long time, decades in fact. Colonies also began to appear on moons like Pandora, Io, and Titan. With this success, humanity also spread beyond the Sol sector, aiming mainly towards their allies. And humanity began to set up mining colonies, farming communities, manufacturing stations, and even a shipbuilding facility on Proxima. Humanity had spread out so fast that no one had any cause to create trouble inside humanity's borders, though a few actually tried, so that they could somehow achieve status and wealth. Not many would fall for their lies, thankfully. The governments of each planet, colony, outpost, or station were all different, and this allowed many to migrate to where they believed they could do better, to live better, the way they wanted to. Unlike the past, there is no misconception of how easy life is going to be just by showing up on a new planet or station. Knowing they had to contribute to be ready for the next wave of Xenos, no one argued about the hard work. A major bonus that helped everybody on this was the new technology that they had discovered. In fact, time may be a factor, but now age is not. With those that go through the process of enhancements that used to require space flight, humans do not seem to age unless they actually want to or try. Things like excessive drinking to the point of hangovers or constant sucking of cigarettes are major factors in aging, though those that cannot get themselves away from the drugs still age very, very quickly. And of course, one can understand how society would look at those who aren't even old yet, but definitely look that way. Those that have debilitating conditions found themselves completely cleared of illness or self reconstructed. Unfortunately, the attempt for governments to outlaw this technology was met with heavy justice for those suffering and their families. The politicians, especially, who had access to this tech and then denied it to the majority of humanity, found out that if people cannot get justice in the courts, they found it in the streets. After some blood was spilled, then some buildings were razed to the ground by fire, the tech was finally released to the public and made safe and legal. What surprised the living crap out of everybody is once the technology was out there and everybody could look at it, there were many who could not only refine this tech, but improve it significantly. Folks you wouldn't even think about. And this is the true age of technological development as they started to reach heights that they didn't even understand at first. The population of humanity exploded at this point as they reached out to the stars. In the 2 decades since the crew was taken, humanity has efficiently doubled, yet only 30% of those live on Earth. The rest have gone beyond the cradle to seek out new life and new civilization, all the while realizing danger lurks out there in the darkness. On Josa 7, a colony was being established when their alarms started blaring like crazy. All ships that could activate their interdiction fields did so. Being very close to a new Yankee border, they prayed that this was just one of the patrols, but they were wrong. A small squadron of taint ships jumped out of FTL and began to scan the sector. Since the colony was still setting up, they didn't have much in the way of defenses. Petrified, all they could do is watch and wait. They watched the little taints move around the sector, eventually moving close to the colony. As they seemed to get the attention of the ships approached, and then these same ships received a message. 2 words: go away. This was in the taint's own language, which made all of their ships suddenly halt, spraying their forward jets, so they definitely stopped cold, and they hung in the void for a while as they simply waited for a second, seemingly trying to figure out what to do. Then they turned around and left. This made everybody nervous, although not nearly as nervous as what they saw in the sensors. A vast armada was heading towards Earth. Not only that, but a full battle groups heading to Yankit and Kashmir space. This did not look like an invasion force. Checking the scanner data, it was clear to see massive battleships as they stopped to let their engines cool. Surrounding them on all sides were warbirds of every class, from corvette to cruiser. It would be easy to think that this was simply another invasion force if you didn't realize what was missing. There were absolutely 0 invasion carriers. These ships are purpose-built to carry the extreme amount of resources needed to successfully depart from space to make planetfall and take said planet. Without the carriers and the abundance of heavy battleships, it is clear that this is the Pantheon version of Plan B. If an invasion fails, exterminate. 2 arms is the call that came and spread out across the human-held territories. Everybody stated that same old terms: 2 arms! All ships capable of fighting are immediately recalled back to the Sol sector. Reason being is that the invasion force is only heading towards the homeworlds, and humanity must protect its own. For 3 weeks, ships of all makes and models arrive into Sol, from the largest dreadnought to the smallest transport they amassed. Assigned to a world or moon, they only took up assignment and positions and then waited. Even those from Sparta actually showed up and surprisingly listened to orders from Venus. The Spartans are known for their, shall we say, inability to listen to other commands besides their own. Yet they do have some of the best warships that humanity has to offer. But this time, it's surprising. They just seem to shut up and listen. Everyone from the admiral to the mercenary knew what was at stake, so they definitely were not going to play games. They know that they must all fight together, or Earth, and eventually humanity itself, will fall. If that happens, then humans will be barely a footnote in some pantheon's ledger. Knowing that their allies would be facing the same challenges made everybody anxious and calm at the same time. To assure everyone's morale, a set of ships were highlighted. This was a beacon that humanity not only stands alone, but stands with friends. These are tiefling ships. Numbering only 4, they actually requested to be in the vanguard. This is only denied because the ships consist of 3 corvettes and 1 frigate. It's just not enough tonnage and not enough bang bang to go around. When the Pantheon fleet jumped into Sol, it was just outside Saturn's orbit. Then another fleet arrived. The Floppy had sent several heavy battle groups along. To everyone's shock, as they watched the fleets advance, another group jumped in. It was the Taints, and they had decided to join the fight. The Taint ships are not very large, but each of them has a very large spinal mounted cannon that takes up most of the ship. They then begin to position themselves with the other 2 fleets. So, as you looked at it, the Pantheons were mostly on the vanguard with their big battleships. Then you look, and the Taints were now positioned between the Floppies and Uranus. This is an impressive amount of ships by anyone's standard, and they seem to advance as one heading directly towards Earth. It's as though they don't give the first flip of a fart about the colonies as they pass, as they keep the bows of their ships facing straight towards humanity's home planet. As the combined fleet pushes forward, they receive a message. This is Admiral Khan. It is clear that you are not here on a mission of peace. However, if you leave human territory now, we can assure your safety. There is a pause before he continues. At that point, a small data packet is sent. Then he starts talking again. Before we begin, I suggest you read over and agree to the documentation sent to you. These are the rules that we will allow both sides to conduct operations without causing unnecessary casualties. There is a very long pause before any response. The invasion force continued forward and right into the human debris field, and can only find colonies and stations and just a few ships on their sensors. The drones don't even seem to care. This is odd, and the Pantheons are wondering why the humans sent all this. Then the humanity finally gets a response. This is Supreme High Commander of the Pantheon's 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Grand Fleets. Supreme Commander Mekletar, we have looked over your rules and find them completely unacceptable. You dare to demand that we follow these intentions? We are Pantheons. Neither we nor our associates, the Floppy or the Taint, would ever consider such pathetic ideas as rules of warfare. Then your intentions.
We will destroy your pathetic fleet, set your colonies ablaze, kill every human we find except for those that we take, those that we desire to use for our own personal uses. We will then take your young so that they may be raised as our pets, knowing that they are beneath our feet. Once we are done taking what we want, we will downgrade your homeworld from a death world to a hell world where nothing survives.
Hearing this, Admiral Khan waits for a second before responding. Then he says, Are you willing to accept your people back when this is all over? We still have them. At that point, the stations that the prisoners were on is actually pinged to the other fleet. Those stations are unarmed, as they just hold prisoners of your previous invasion.
They have failed and have soiled their family names with their incompetence and their cowardice. They are no longer a concern.
So you are ready to go to war, total war, with all of humanity? Are you sure you don't want to sign that document first?
You are beneath my station. I would never sign an agreement with you or your species. Let there be a war. Let the slaughter begin.
The Pantheon ships begin to charge their heavy weapons as they start to take aim at the human ships. They only get one more response from Admiral Khan. Your funeral. With that, the mines that had stuck to the passing ships detonated. Mines just small enough and with such little mass that the enemy sensors do not pick them up as manufactured products, or dangerous for that matter. The massive battleships begin to sway wildly as components are vented, and parts seem to explode as they're penetrated. Any that had reached 100% charge on their cannons suddenly found the cannons exploding inside the hull. The ship and body parts began to sputter across space as the rest of the fleet tried to advance. The lead ships are actually so large and moving so sporadically at that point that collisions are bound to happen. As the front lines begin to go dark along with all their battleships, the second line tried to advance as projectiles began heading their way towards them. Solid projectiles that cannot be detected. The Pantheons didn't understand. Every time they fire some sort of electromagnetic weapon, there should be some resonance. There should be a pulse. What the hell is going on? Along with that, guided munitions that seem to arrive from seemingly nowhere and are surprisingly difficult to intercept are screaming at them. Space becomes a tangled mess of ships trying to avoid shots, avoid each other, and trying to avoid the out of control ships with large pieces being blown out into their formations. Those that were able to actually weave their way through and get a clear shot towards Earth, they accelerated as fast as they could and then passed through even more mines and ended up adrift as all their atmosphere was just suddenly gone. A few simply exploded as their cooling system shut down and the engines went critical. In the chaos, the Pantheon still tried to forge ahead in a straight up slug match, but the Taint and the Floppy, well, they had different ideas. They used micro jumps to get as close to their target as possible. The Taint jumped to Earth opposite the moon. As they adjusted their positions to aim their fixed cannons down towards Earth, they found out that Earth isn't helpless. Though they can't see them on their sensors, the defense satellites are able to adjust their position a hell of a lot faster as they don't have to worry about crushing anyone inside. They're automated, of course. With this, they began sending a barrage of missiles out. The Taint ships on the outside of the formation began to fire back while the rest of them tried to line up their shots. As they warm up their cannons, something very large and very heavy comes through and shreds two ships, sending them cartwheeling through space. Before the Taint can even figure out what the hell is going on, another large piece of tungsten from a planetary defense cannon takes out another ship, and then when it does, it takes it for a hell of a ride and tears the second one clean in half. The Taint are able to fire one volley as single human fighters began to fire upon them. These upgraded fighters came screaming up towards the stratosphere and gave the one command that every single enemy does not want to hear: torpedoes away. And as that comes over the comms, as each of the improved fighters exits the atmosphere and heads towards a Taint ship, each of the torpedoes penetrating deep into the ship, and the Taints have just enough time to realize what's about to happen before they get their ticket punched, as the torpedoes explodes inside the ship, causing massive damage. The floppy over on Mars have it just a little easier since Mars is not as defended as Earth. In desperation, the captain's order was, "Fire everything!" When the subordinates asked, "Fire what? Where?" "Everywhere!" With that, they began spamming fire all over the place, trying desperately to hit the satellites, and got a few lucky shots, but also hit the station holding their POWs. And with that, one can say there's no more POWs. Seeing the station get torn apart and seeing the prisoners so casually killed, the humans on Mars lost all their chill. The satellites even dropped their cloaks to fire their particle lasers, literally cutting a path of destruction through the floppy fleet. The planetary cannons, which had just risen from their subterranean facilities, fired as fast as they could reload. Due to the more advanced technology and the fact that Mars doesn't have much in the way of an atmosphere, Martian fighters do not need wings to reach high and get their torpedoes off. Many of them have torpedoes actually wrapped around the fuselage, and most releasing their entire combat load right into the enemy's face. Through all this, both the floppy and the Taints were able to fire into populated areas. Mars may be protected due to most of its population being underground, but it did not save them all. On Earth, the Taints had been able to fire directly into the largest major city they could find. The floppy hit one of the dome colonies on Mars, in fact, the largest dome colony. Hearing this, the combined fleets of humanity turned towards the rapidly depleting Pantheon fleet. With the loss of their biggest guns due to the mines, and now the total loss of their allies, the few Pantheon remaining said, "Nope," and began to run for it. As the surviving Pantheons bolted back through the debris field trying to use it as cover, several more are hit as they try to clear the exploding ships, clear all the debris, but they have to get away from there so that they can actually activate their FTL. Admiral Khan sent a message right before the last ones got away and made sure that it was spread across their entire battle group so that they all heard it. He sent the message: "You have just awoken the sleeping giant, and we're coming for you, and hell's coming with us." Hello everybody, it's Syntext. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. And before I go, I'd like to send out a couple really big thank you to a couple of my supporters. This time, it's a thank you going to Hamish, and also going to the Sir. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you next time. This is Syntex, ejecting.